Welcome to Fat Squirrel Speaks. Today is Friday, November 15th. I am Amy Beth, also known as the Fat Squirrel on Ravelry and the Fat SQRRL on Instagram. Ooh, that's a lot of reflection. The Fat SQRRL on Instagram. Hi, thanks for coming over. Yeah, today is, so I'm in Central Indiana. Thanks for coming over in the sort of perfect November weather. Right? It's drizzly, it's moody, you need to bundle up a little bit, it's damp. Just gonna write in your let's just write in our journals by candlelight together. I know, right? I don't, what a exercise accountability partner. I need journaling accountability partner. I need self-reflection accountability partner. I'm not saying that one of those partners is any less valuable than the other, but it is interesting that we only talk about one of them. We only talk about one of them, and I'm just saying. Sorry, tangent. No, not sorry. Welcome to the Tangent Show. That's what we do here all the time. Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, let's come over. We'll drink tea. We'll eat delicious Gold Rush apples. We'll crunch merrily away as we journal in the reflective November milieu. Right? I think that sounds like a full-on date, y'all. Let's do it. So this week's episode is going to have a little bit of stitching, a new project, a new cast on. Yeah, let's get into it. So, Shenanigans of the mind. No. Shameless self-promotion. I was hoping to have an update on November 15th. That would be today. But I don't. I'm going to have one December 1st. I've been trying to do some little bit of experimentation, try to play around with some stuff. And I've been having a lot of trouble doing that. That's generally not something I'm good at. In the best of times, I'm not good at experimentation. I don't like to admit that about myself, but it's true. It's not a space I feel comfortable in, the experimental space. But I've been trying to do it, and then and then also in a space that I'm not great in, has just led to me not being very productive on that front. So working on your pre-orders, if that feels comfortable, because it's something I know and understand. So thank you for everybody who made a pre-order. I really appreciate you. But I will have an update on December 1st. Then, Shenanigans of the mind. Yeah, so last week I talked about some things that were helping me feel better, they were helping me feel better. So, I don't know, I guess I'll talk about some more this week? I don't know. So, something I've been doing that's been helping me feel better is, I've been journaling in a very, not consistent, building on consistency. But it is helping me to shovel some of the stuff out of my brain. I got some hoarder's brain action happening. And it's kind of helping me shovel some of the thoughts out. I'm not saying that now it's a pristine minimalist landscape. I don't know. It's not a pristine minimalist. I was about to say, I don't know that my brain will ever be like that. But maybe it will. I don't know. But it's certainly not now. But at least it feels a little bit less like I can't enter without the fear of everything toppling down on me. Maybe that's a bit of hyperbole, but whatever. It's at least helping me move towards that. I was just imagining the room of requirement and all the piles of stuff. Yeah, that's kind of what my brain feels like sometimes. Maybe most of the time. It's hard to tease out one thing without an entire pile of stuff either teetering to the point that you think you have anxiety over it falling down, or it's just literally falling on your head. So yeah, like journaling is always like one of the highly recommended things, right? It's like right on the top of the list of like, if you're having a rough spot, I don't know if it's on the top of the list, but in my brain it is. That's the messaging I have somehow teased out of the universe. And it's always been something that I have aspired to do because it feels like a good habit, right? Like it feels like it would be a good habit, but it's never felt good, or it's never felt good enough to continue with, or it's never been a priority in a real way, like more of like an aspirational priority. But I did ketamine therapy in the spring. And it was helpful for a lot of different reasons in a lot of different ways. If that is something you've never considered, I would suggest talking to your mental health professional. The way I kind of like entered into the thought space of around doing it was through How to Change Your Mind, which is a Michael Pollan book. I can never remember when I say his name, if it's Pollan or Pollan or... I've heard it a million times. Brain can't hold on to it. Which was like a wild experience. Because it talks about, not ketamine specifically, I mean, they do talk about ketamine, but specifically it is about just generally it's about hallucinogens like psilocybin or ayahuasca. The neuroplasticity that's been shown that's an effect of those drugs. It talks about the history of psilocybin use and how it was LSD, and how, right, because it was specifically LSD, that was used to treat alcoholism in the 50s, and it really had so much promise, but then counterculture stuff happened, and we began our war on drugs, and it was sort of like a vilified substance, but it had all of these like therapeutic effects that just were sort of pushed away or under the rug. And so there's been sort of a resurgence in that study. It's not a super well funded study because it's not like Eli Lilly is going to make tons of bank off of that drug because it already exists. But there is a lot of movement. There's a lot of like expansion within therapeutic spaces to look at how these drugs can be used in therapeutic ways and like the real positive effects they have for people. That was all aside. That was all to say that when I did that ketamine therapy, one of the things that I found super helpful and that I was actually really proud of was that, I'm doing it again. One of the things I felt really proud of is that I was able to adhere to like a journaling and meditation schedule for myself. Meditation is another thing that has been an aspirational goal, but was never attainable for me before. And so those things sort of lined up and worked really well for me. And since then I've gotten away from them, right? Like you kind of forge some good habits that you find helpful, and that like upon reflection, you're like, no, that really helped me. But you know, everything ate away at making that a consistent thing in my life. And I need to like go back to it because maybe it'll be helpful in this space too. So again, just baby steps in that direction for me. I would love to know if that's something that you find helpful. The meditation aspect of that I talked about was I used, upon the suggestion of my guide, my coach, that's what they call them. They call them coaches. But upon the suggestion of my coach, it started to feel like way more mystical when I said guide. And I was like, no, that's not what the vibe was. Upon the suggestion of my coach, I used an app called, did I not bring my phone over? Well, that's interesting. I used an app that had like a 30-day sort of like introductory thing. And then after that you had to pay, but the 30 days was free. And there was a 30-day progression course about meditation. And so it was sort of like, I would say it would be called maybe guided mindfulness meditation. And that really helped me because I had some preconceived notions about what meditation was, and why it didn't work for me. And that app really helped me to dispel some of those notions and sort of just helped me enter into that space a lot more in a way that felt really, again, felt really good. Like it felt really good in that time. And then like I just let it slip away. So yeah, I'm trying to get back to that. So the app I used, again, not affiliated, was Waking Up. I could remember the icon, but couldn't remember what it was called. So yeah, I don't know. Whatever. The thing I like about YouTube, the thing I like about this media is just that it's a way to see other regular people living their life. Some people really like aspirational YouTube, like they want to see a lifestyle that they don't have, but they would like to have. And I'm not saying that I'm immune to that or that I think it's not good. It's just not what I necessarily want from this space, and it's not necessarily what I want to make. It's definitely not what I want to make. I was watching the new Netflix documentary about Martha Stewart, and that was a really interesting sort of like light bulb moment of like, because I can remember very vividly being of a young age, and when Martha Stewart Living first sort of like came into my life. I don't know how long after the publication started that I started to see it, but like my mamaw had a subscription, I think, and we did not consume in my household when I was growing up. My mom did not consume like women's magazines. In fact, when I went to college, I worked in the library, and it was like the first time I had seen a women's magazine, because while I had peers, that was not like an intersection of something that we talked about or like participated in. And I remember because mom had tons of craft stuff, like, right, it was like crafting books, crafting magazines. That was her jam. But there was no like sort of like popular media really in the house. And I never noticed the lack of it because, again, I was very much an introvert at that time, did not have a lot of close social relationships where I would be like hanging out at other people's houses to see that was a different thing in my house. And so the first time I saw, like, I don't know what, it was like a popular women's magazine. I was reading it at the circulation desk, and I was just like, oh. Like, I had a lot of shame and a lot of self-loathing, but when I read that magazine, I was like, oh, A, that could have been so much worse for me. And B, this is why we all hate ourselves so much. Like, not solely, obviously, but it was like a very weird window into like, yeah, that makes more sense now. Because again, like, you had like regular television media where they were only portraying people as like thin and young and attractive and white. Not exclusively, but primarily in the 80s. But the message wasn't as explicit, right? It wasn't, I mean, there was definitely insane fat phobia in terms of like, just like the disgust and contempt. And again, the like just lazy way to write a character as being those things is to just make them fat, you know? So that was there. But again, it was just like, I think again, I was like, oh, I understand why I hate myself as like a fat person, a capital F fat person. But like, why do people who just have like a nostril that's bigger than the other? Gosh, I didn't realize that I had that until like 5 years ago. Like, why do those people hate themselves so much? And it's like, oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. Where was this going? Oh, aspirational magazines, Martha Stewart Living. So yeah, like I remember being really intrigued by that magazine and really just like I just want to hoover it up. But it definitely like had products in it that I was never going to have in that time frame. And I'm sure set up like a cycle of like want and consumption and what have you. But so it's just interesting to think about that, because I never thought about that. I never had that vocabulary or understanding that there was like this aspirational thing. And like, again, we know that we kind of have that, I think, more in our vocabulary with the prevalence of social media. And like, that's one of the things that can be really problematic for people. And it's one of the things that I resist quite a bit. I know that I don't completely resist it, but it's one of the things I try to be really conscious of, because it puts me in a bad headspace if I'm not really aware of it. I don't know where this even started, y'all, but thanks for coming over, because that's really how we roll here. Sometimes the discussion becomes so parenthetical that we just can't work our way back to the origin, and we just have to accept that we are where we are, and we're just going to move forward from here. We're not going to try to retrace it. So yeah, it's one of the things I like about this space. We're back. It's one of the things I like about this space is that I like just seeing people kind of like struggle, quite frankly. I mean, it's not like what is this, Schadenfreude or whatever. It's not that I enjoy watching people struggle, but like, it helps me feel less alone in those spaces. So, I don't know, that's what I'm trying for. Okay. Okay. Oh, okay. Other things that I am enjoying this week. So that was a thing that I'm trying to do to enjoy this week. One of the things I am passively enjoying is, oh my gosh, Couples Therapy, the show. I don't know how I had never heard about this. I mean, I do know how I had never heard about it. I don't watch television and like whatever. I can understand why I haven't heard about it, but oh my gosh. So interesting. Have you watched it? It's called Couples Therapy. It is a reality television show. So I guess we call those unscripted television shows. And you follow a couples therapist, and she interacts with like a handful of couples for a set number of sessions. So it's a finite time frame. And they have agreed to have their therapy filmed. Of course, it's edited. It's not like the full hour. So we're always kind of aware of that. And like, but the editing seems to be pretty neutral. It doesn't seem to feel like it's highly motivated. Of course, it might just be so good that I don't know that it's highly motivated. But sort of, for example, like when you're watching shows like Love is Blind, I think is one of the ones that just like jumps to the front of my brain. It seems like the editing is really pushing a narrative, and like whether that's good or bad, or again, like whatever, it seems more upfront, or not upfront, but like more in the front. And the couples therapy didn't really feel like that. It didn't feel sensationalized. It felt just really like a window into like what's going on with these different people, what's going on with their relationship with each other. And it's been really interesting. So I just hoovered it, for better or for worse. I just took it all in. And I found it to be really interesting. Not in just a voyeuristic way, but like in a real, like, again, I think it just, maybe because I'm an introvert and I do feel like I have friendships, but I don't have a lot of in-person, daily, day-to-day, I see the minutia of your life friendships, which I think most people don't have. But I think that one of the victims of a lifestyle like that is that I try to be empathetic towards other people, but sometimes I just don't have what I need to do that. Like I'll like try to reason about why something is happening or somebody's acting the way they are, but like I just don't have enough of the tools that I might have learned like through that sort of like day in, day out living with other people with different perspectives. And so I feel like that's one of the reasons I really enjoy shows like that, is because they help me grow that empathy. They help that muscle get strengthened. And even shows that are not like therapy based, like Confession. I enjoy Dr. Pimple Popper sometimes. I haven't watched it for quite some time, but I have enjoyed that show. And like I had a moment where I was watching that show and somebody had a condition, and I had seen a person like a few years before that with that condition, and I thought to myself, why doesn't she take care of that? Of course. Why did I think that? Of course she would take care of that if there was a way to take care of that. If there was a like reasonable way to make her daily life easier. Of course but in my naivete, my just obliviousness, I just thought, wow, why doesn't she just get that taken care of? Like I'm all about like how the fact that medical procedures are super expensive and like hard to navigate and all that stuff. Like I had that in my brain, but ultimately I was like, wow, that feels like that's like such impact on her life. Like, of course she would take care of it. There are things you can't take care of. There are conditions that recur, like you do treatment for, and then they just recur. And so like there's a point in your life, I'm sure I would have that point where I was like, yeah, this is no longer worth what I have to go through to be more acceptable, because why didn't I have that empathy? I'm living in a body that people look at and are like, why doesn't she take care of that? And yet I still couldn't extend that to her. So I know that like unscripted TV gets a bad rap, and I understand why it does in many ways. It can be really problematic at times, and there's things that aren't good about it, quite frankly. But for me, anyway, it is a way to grow that empathy, to like work on that muscle. And not only just for other people, but for myself, for things that I might do that I'm not really conscious of, that I'm not really aware of in the day-to-day. And then I can see that behavior exhibited by somebody and usually get really annoyed by it because it's something that I do and that I don't like about myself. So I don't know. I feel like sometimes I have this tendency to want to defend my enjoyment of, or like couch it in something else. And I'm sure a lot of it is like a classist reaction. It's like an intellectual, like I don't want to be seen as like lowbrow, although I quite frankly constantly say things that are lowbrow. I'm sure that like that's all like coloring why I feel like I need to like defend my enjoyment of these things, but whatever, it is what it is. Okay. So yeah, couples therapy. And then, as if that wasn't enough, I needed therapizing upon therapizing. And I found a psychologist in Seattle. So he is in fact a psychologist in Seattle. And one of the things he does is reaction videos. And he did a reaction video to this series. And that was super interesting to hear just another perspective. Like, because again, Orla, the therapist in the show, she's actively doing therapy. There are cutaways to her, like, in session with other counselors, like in her, like in a team, or like in her, like a supervisory role. Like there are like some more meta moments of her talking about the therapy and like what's going on and how she can do something different or whatever. That's included in the show. But then again, you have that additional layer of like another therapist with what appears to be a relatively different approach. So Orla does psychoanalysis, and then I don't think that I have seen in that series of reactions where the psychologist in Seattle, I'm pretty sure that's what it is, I don't think he has said in that, has said like what his, I don't know what you even call that, like his flavor of therapy is, his focus, his whatever. I don't think it doesn't seem like it's psychoanalysis. I think, whatever. So that's interesting to like see his reaction. It was funny also. I felt very defensive of her when he would be like, I don't know that I would have done it that way. I'm all like, Orla! Orla does everything right. That's the name of the therapist in the original couples therapy show. I was like, you, and there's also like sex, like I was like putting sexism and stuff on that. I'm sure. But it was just, it's really interesting. So if you're needing like a little like brain scratch, and that's something that you're interested in, they have a good, the original show, Couples Therapy, has a pretty good range of cultures, of races, of sexual orientations, of what do we call like monogamous versus polyamorous? I'm not sure. I guess that's still considered orientation. But anyway, sorry, I'm talking out loud, I'm asking questions out loud. There's a lot of different colors. Good age. Did I say that? There was a lot of different ages involved. There feels like there's different economic classes involved. I think there are. Those not like as easy sometimes to parse out because they're in this different space. Like there is a point where they're doing some therapy remotely in their homes because of COVID. That was also just really interesting. I don't know that I don't think I have really watched anything where people are sort of living through that initial wave of COVID. And I wasn't really expecting it because the show's not about that, obviously. And so that was really weird and strange to see that sort of like, again, it's not the focus, but it's happening. And to kind of get like dropped back in, like how that felt, and like all the, yeah, it was strange to sort of like be unexpectedly dropped back in that. So I would just say that like, yeah, if you have a problem with that, like maybe don't watch I think it's the second season. Maybe it's the very tail end of the first season, whatever. You can probably tell from descriptions. But that was a really interesting, just sort of brain experiment of like being sort of back in that space. In more in the feelings of that space, because it wasn't about like a timeline or like what was, because I know that I have listened to like podcasts and things like that where it's been a more like intellectual experience, like a more like knowledge and like trying to synthesize what happened and like how we reacted and stuff like that. But to be just in like the feelings of it was a very different, a different place. I should probably think more about that, but whatever. I got more things to think about. Oh my gosh, so many things to think about. Quarter spring. The room of requirement is toppling over. Yeah. So, yeah, let's, in this shorter episode where I rambled for a really long time, let's talk about some crafts. Yeah. So sorry if there was just a really intense like brightness change to you. I totally forgot to reset the ISO, which is like the amount of light that the camera gathers, because I've been feeling really moody and the outside is very moody. When it was like moody on the screen, I was just like, yeah, that works. Yeah, maybe I'm gonna just put it back because like it did feel very authentic, right? Yeah, let's just be moody. I don't know what we're moodying. We're feeling it. The vibes, they're happening. Okay, so I have a new cast on. I have cast on another Musselburgh hat, which is a hat pattern by Isolde Teague, and it is written for, I think, 4 or 5 different gauges, and I think 4 or 5 different sizes. I've talked about it before. It's one of my favorites. But I have cast that on in Jinx yarn. So Jinx is G-Y-N-X, Jinx yarns, in their colorway, in their Strong Sport self-striping, which is 80% superwash merino, 20% nylon, 328 yards. And its colorway is called Abandoned Carnival. And yeah, so here's the ball, just to kind of give you an idea. Like, and it's just like a great tan, gray, red, just like that really like flannel shirt kind of vibe. And here she is so far in the hat. So I am knitting this on US ones. Yes, US ones. Yeah, that's, I guess, all there is to talk about. That's the Musselburgh hat by Isolde Teague. It's definitely not my first choice for gift hats. I mean, it is in a way, because you can kind of like do any gauge, any size, and then the hat itself is quite flexible. Like if people want to wear a slouchy hat, it works. People like to wear more of a beanie style hat, it works. But it is a lot of knitting. So it's definitely not, it's a lot of knitting. End of story. And then in stitching, okay, so I'll show you the thing first. That's actually, yeah, that's what I've been working on. I started this project 1,000,000 years ago. This is a needlepoint kit. This is the designer, Bull Dyer, I guess is how you say it. The Stella is the name of the like clutch. So there are, I guess maybe it's this is the specific pattern, but there are lots of these kits. I mean, there's at least half a dozen of them. And I did buy this kit directly from an overseas retailer because I couldn't find one in the US. And I really like it. I don't know why it's taking me so long to finish. I'm still working on it. Because I really enjoy it. I enjoy working on it. It's just time consuming, I guess. It's not necessarily any more time consuming than regular cross stitch. So, and in fact, it's less time consuming. But I don't know, whatever. It is what it is. But I love the yarn that's in the kit. It's this great sort of like semi-woolen spun, I would say. It's stronger. And that might be like, it's just like a fiber that has a longer staple, but it's really great. It has this wonderful like heathered quality to it. It's very satisfying to me visually. I enjoy working on it. I don't know why it's been languishing for so long. But here is mine so far. Doesn't that look good? I'm not gonna lie, I was on the website this morning looking at other options. I originally bought this kit because I was like, oh, I'll learn if this is something I enjoy. I'll learn like what the yarn is that they use. Because theoretically you could just use your scraps, right? Like you could use, you know, fingering weight yarn. This might be like a light fingering. But anyway, like you could make it work because there's different mesh sizes for needlepoint. And originally I got it because I was like, oh, I'll just learn to see if this is something I enjoy and if this is like sort of like what it should be, so that when I try to experiment with scrap yarns and my own stuff, I'll understand if it feels right. So then I immediately was like, yeah, I need another kit. You do not need another kit. You want another kit. Slow your roll. I will say that as needlepoint kits go, they're very affordable. The pillow kit, I think because I was looking at one of the pillows, I just did the math on the conversion from the Danish kroner, and I think that pillow kit's like $100, which is not an insignificant amount of money. Please don't get misunderstand me, but needlepoint is exorbitantly expensive because I understand why. It's like they're hand painted canvases. There's a lot of like skill and expertise that goes into that, just the canvas. But if you're okay with doing a counted project where you are taking the graphic, like doing cross stitch essentially just with a different fiber, then that makes it something that's much more affordable. I would say, yeah. Anyway, so they're very tempting. There's one that's like all half square triangles, and it's definitely not like a palette that I have a lot of. It's sort of more of like this kind of vibe, this granny striped sweater that I'm wearing. It's sort of like slightly more that vibe, and it's super attractive. Stop talking about it. You're gonna just talk yourself into buying it, which is not what you need to do. But so, yeah, but isn't it so attractive? And then they give you the fabric for the backing, the lining, the zipper. I think there's even like a little zipper pull thing. So I just have to do, whoop, these guys here, do the white part. Yeah. Another thing that was different about this kit is they have this, double needlepoint canvas, which I don't see in the United States. Like I only see, I think it's called mono canvas or whatever. And like theoretically it's made so like cross stitching on linen, you can do over 2 or over 1. This is all over 2 in this case. But it would be weird to do like an over 1 because it's not symmetrical. I'm sure it's just because like the yarn is enough to like push the spacing of that skinnier bar out, because I don't know if you can see it. You probably can't see it because I'm having my Moody lighting day. Oh, that's not. The canvas, I'm like, you're not even gonna be able to see it on this. Why do I think this is gonna be better for you? I'm like, let me draw it. But draw it to the exact like same scale as it is actually presented in life, because that'll be easier for you to see. What is wrong with me? Don't answer that question. So just like briefly, this canvas that I'm working on looks like this. And so over 2 is like the cross stitches like this. But theoretically, you can go between these threads. And I'm assuming that because the wool is like a bigger gauge, like it takes up a lot of space, like that it would theoretically just push this string over. And so you could do the over 1. But the project is all done over 2. So I was also curious about what that difference in that fabric was, because I didn't see it very much in the United. I think there was like an Etsy seller maybe who had it or something, but it wasn't something I'd ever seen before. And I do like it. I do like the fabric. It has stiffness, but it's definitely softened up quite a bit. So it's easy to like work with. It's easy to like roll it, because I just do all of my stitching in hand. I don't use a hoop or anything. And so I do like it, but I'm going to try to do an experiment next with just like the traditional mono canvas. To see if like how I like that. I think it'll probably be equivalent and much easier to get a hold of. But yeah, I've enjoyed it. So if you like cross stitching and you're curious about needlepoint, I think a counted project is a good way to start if you're okay with counting, which sounds dismissive. That's not what I mean. I have very smart friends who will say like, I just don't like to count for cross stitching. It's not, it's just like whether or not you enjoy that. But yeah. And then I don't think I've ever shown you this, but I have finished it. One of the things that I loved about early eBay was, okay, loved is probably too weak a word. I had a slight problem with buying vintage Crewel embroidery kits. And so, yeah, I don't know what happened that I was like, oh yeah, I think I want a little stitchery project. I'm sure that's what happened. I thought, oh, I want a little stitchery project. And I found this kit. It's called Mini Pheasants by Columbia Minerva is the manufacturer, and the designer is Erica Wilson, who is huge in the vintage Crewel world. Her kits, I really like her style. I really like her aesthetic. And I usually like the kits that she does because they tend to be like doable for me. Some of the Crewel kits are just so tedious and tiny. I just would not enjoy doing them. And hers tend to have like more of a graphic is not the right word, but like more simplified image. I don't know. They're not made to look like you're trying to capture the world in the most realistic way. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't know, whatever. I enjoy doing them, period. So yeah, here's mine so far. I finished up. The other thing that was really funny about this kit, and I've got to find it, is that it actually comes with the frame. Like this little like plastic frame. So while I don't love this frame, I kind of want to use it just because it's so novel that it came with the frame. We'll see how I feel. Or if I can find it. Full disclosure. But isn't it charming and fun? And for the longest time I had done the grass and like 2 of the flowers, and then it just sat forever. But yeah, it was really fun and cute. Very enjoyable. So yeah, if you like doing Crewel embroidery, or you like doing embroidery, but you've never done Crewel embroidery, those vintage kits are a fun way to start. So the last thing I'll talk about is what I'm reading. So generally what I do here is just sort of like give you like a general overview of the book, and then maybe talk about like one thing that's sort of stuck with me, or like that I found more impactful. But what I am going to start trying to do is, like I would like to share more of what I'm reading with you, but this isn't necessarily feel like the right space, just because like it just doesn't. So I'm going to try to start doing more of that over on Patreon. So if you like the book talk stuff and you kind of want more, if you're a Patreon person and you just don't follow your emails, like I'm going to try to work on that over there. There's one out. I'm going to work on another one this weekend. So yeah, just like FYI, if that's something you're interested in, you can find out more on patreon.com, The Fat Squirrel. Full stop. So I have just finished reading Tamed. It's a book by Alice Roberts, 10 Species That Changed Our World. And so this sort of falls into that like history of things, sort of like sub-genre. And I really like that. I really like the window that it provides. You get really specific about like, oh, we're going to look at how salt, you know, has affected human history, or has like, you know, so you think, oh, it's a book about salt. That doesn't necessarily sound like really intriguing, but it just gives you a window to hone in, to narrow down like bigger, sort of like more amorphous historical things, and gives you like a different window to look at them through, which is the thing that I really enjoy about this sort of like, again, subgenre. Of like, and it's like a crossover too. It's like a history and it's science. So there's lots of fun interplay between those things. It's got sociology, it's got anthropology, it's got like, so again, it's just a, let me read you the back blurb. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors depended on wild plants and animals to stay alive until they began to tame them. Combining archaeology and cutting-edge genetics, Tamed tells the story of the greatest revolution in human history, revealing the fascinating origins of 10 crucial domesticated species and how they, in turn, transformed us. In a world creaking under the strains of human activity, Alice Roberts urges us to look again at our relationship with the natural world and our huge influence upon it. Isn't that a great line? In a world creaking under the strain of human activity. I mean, I would say that's an understatement, but also just it's an interesting. Anyway, so the 10 things are dogs, wheat, cattle, maize, corn, potatoes, chickens, rice, horses, apples. So of course I got an apples chapter. I'm invested. But yeah, like, have you ever, like, the maize thing has always been so fascinating to me, right? Like, because wild maize, it's not even, there's, you would, as a layperson, you would never look at that plant and be like, yes, that's clearly where corn came from. And so if you're curious about stuff like that, like if that's something that intrigues you, this is a great book. This was written in 2017, I want to say. So while the book blurb does sort of like give you, say, things like up-to-date science, it's like, okay, just take everything with a little grain of salt. Things have progressed. But nothing that felt like wildly like out of place or, crazily different. So among other things, right, we're talking about these 10 different things that humans have changed and adapted to suit our needs over the years. One of the things that she talks about is just briefly, but I thought it was really interesting in terms of like GMO, like genetically modified organisms and things like that. And she provides a point of distinction that I didn't understand, that I didn't actually know was a thing. And it's called radiation breeding. It's where, it's literally where radiation is used to sort of like accelerate cell mutations that might have naturally occurred over a very long period of time. But she says, radiation breeding is described as being simply an accelerated version of the spontaneous mutation that occurs in organisms and which is the stuff of variation, the lifeblood evolution itself. But we're already modifying DNA using radiation and calling that radiation breeding. It strikes me that we would be calling the more exact and directed biological version enzyme breeding. So that's talking about, I think what we call them more like specific genetically modified, like where you're using enzymes and viruses to insert different DNA into the host's original DNA for changes. And so I didn't actually understand that there was a thing called radiation breeding. Like, I never heard of that. But yeah, that is interesting that is coded differently versus a GMO, a genetically modified organism, which I'll read you the definition from Britannica, is an organism whose genome has been engineered in the laboratory in order to favor the expression of desired physiological traits or the generation of desired biological products. So one of the things she talks about is the rice that has been modified to contain vitamin A, right? The golden rice, because there are lots of people around the world who have a vitamin A deficiency. So that was an interesting discussion too about like how, whatever. That was an interesting discussion too, period. And then it just, in conventional livestock, so back to the quote, in conventional livestock production, crop farming, and even pet breeding, it's long been the practice to breed select individuals of a species in order to produce offspring that have desirable traits. So that's in genetic modification, however, recombinant genetic technologies are employed to produce organisms whose genomes have been precisely altered at the molecular level, usually by the inclusion of genes from unrelated species of organisms that code for traits that would not be obtained easily through conventional selective breeding. And so I'm not in any way an expert. Maybe since 2017, the umbrella of GMO has changed to include that. But it is interesting that we really clutch our pearls. And I'm not saying that I'm pro GMOs or anti GMOs. I actually don't feel like I have enough expertise in the area to really have a strong opinion. But it is interesting that we just, I think, just reactively like clutch our pearls at the thought of sort of like mixing and matching different species. But the idea of irradiating a plant to get it to mutate, maybe we would clutch our pearls equivalently at that if we just knew more about it. I don't, or if we like, it was more in the media. I don't know. But it does feel like one of them feels a little bit more reckless than the other. I don't know. But again, like you're not crossing things that don't cross. So maybe that's what feels scarier to us, is like that chimera sort of vibe. So yeah, that is Tamed 10 Species That Changed Our World by Alice Roberts. Highly recommend if you are a fan of those sort of history of things. The other nice thing about it is because it is specifically chaptered out by the object, by the whatever, it's chaptered out by the topic. It's nice to be able to like pick up and put down. You don't feel like you have to like consume it in one setting. If you do find nonfiction to be sort of like slightly more overwhelming, she's an excellent writer. This is clearly meant for the layperson. This is not, I'm very reactive to academics who I perceive as writing in an obtuse way just to make their book seem more valid in the academic world. That's just sort of like a bias that I have that is like very, just makes me like pull back quite a bit. But she has a very approachable writing style. It's very palatable. And again, because each chapter is broken, it's chaptered by the item, you can just sort of pick and choose. Like if you only want to read about apples, or if you only want to read about maize or whatever. She's also written a book called Ancestors, A History of Britain and Seven Burials, which I very much look forward to reading. It's also been out for quite some time. Yeah, 2021. But I look forward to that as well. Right. The Prehistory of Britain and Seven Burials. That just sounds fascinating. So if you're a fan of like a Time Team or something, she's probably been on Time Team and I don't even realize it. But anyway, so if you're a fan of that vibe, I think that's going to be a good one to read as well. Okay, our tea's cold. And hopefully you've sobered up. There's still rum cake. I don't know if I mentioned that, but you found it. You found it. So hopefully you've sobered up from your rum cake, and we can head home for the day. What do I hope for you this week? I'm putting on my slippers. I'm trying to put my feet down. I hope you find a moment of grace for yourself, whether that like springs from inside and you just allow for some kindness to yourself, allow yourself to view something like you would if you were a friend versus yourself. Like allow yourself to look at something about you like your friend would. Or whether that comes through something you read or something you watch, or an interaction you have with somebody. I hope you have a moment. I hope you have lots of moments, but I'll be less demanding of the universe. I hope you have a moment of grace. I hope you have a moment of forgiving yourself. Have a moment of accepting something about yourself. So I hope that for you this week. Maybe if you look for it, you'll find it. Yeah. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.